That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, we are officially here. We are in the fantasy football playoffs now. What sucks is obviously you can't go through and make any trades, but that is going to make the waiver wire so damn important where you're having to go through, you're having to continue to churn this out. And what's also nice is you're not going to be going up against 11 other owners battling it out on the waiver wire using your fab budget. I mean, having to go through with that custom waiver order, however your league does it. Now you're probably only going to be battling it out with 4 or 5 different other owners, depending on your league settings with how many teams are left. So yeah, let's go through. Let's dive into these running backs. But of course, before we do that, we have to go through and give away some free Fantasy Flock Network hats for the people that went through and left a comment on our top 10 lessons learned video and dropped that like as well. Our first winner going to be coming out from Prob, don't know how to say that. I apologize. And Glenn, thank you all so much for being a part of the flock and supporting the channel. Send me that email ASAP with your address so I can get that hat out to you. And of course, this video is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. Please go sign up for Underdog Fantasy with promo code FLOCK. Nothing, and I repeat, nothing supports this channel more. On Underdog Fantasy, you're going to see a ton of drafts that we are doing on live streams that you can get in with us. And we're going to have a ton of player props you can look at as well, available in damn near every single state. And when you sign up for Underdog Fantasy and you use promo code FLOCK, they'll match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. But that should be it. Let's go through and let's dive into this video. And we're going to lead it off with someone that we shouldn't have to talk about. Like, for the love of God, how? Taysom Hill. I know it's boring. I know if you are, playing at this time of the year, you should be paying attention. You should have picked up Taysom Hill by now. Now, this number that I'm looking at, I'm imagining that it's not 100% accurate. Right now, according to Yahoo Fantasy, Taysom Hill is available in exactly 50% of leagues. Now, as I said, I'd imagine that number is not entirely accurate because keep in mind, if you are an active fantasy football player, which I'd imagine you are based on the fact that you're watching a fantasy football video, you kind of are on top of it. You're probably playing with league mates that are on top of it as well. Keep in mind, a lot of those Yahoo leagues are probably 12-year-old kids that went through and they drafted their team, right at the beginning of school, and they haven't looked at it since then. So please keep that in mind. I'd imagine, though, Taysom Hill, if you're playing in a 10-team format, there'll be some of y'all that haven't picked him up. And we did this with the recap video earlier today, but just to illustrate the cheat code rushing is at the quarterback position in fantasy. I know you're tired of hearing me say it by now, but it is ridiculous, and I need to hammer this in. With Taysom Hill, he has 73 rushing yards this week, as well as 2 rushing touchdowns. If you're looking at what that means from him just with maybe transverting that over to passing yardage, because no, he's not going to be a great passing quarterback. He throws for 175 passing yards and a total of 0 passing touchdowns. Convert that over, his rushing production, and that is a whopping 482 passing yards added on to his 175 if you just take that rushing production. It's a cheat code. It's boring to talk about this over and over again. I know you all are tired of it. And yes, it was a great matchup against the New York Jets. But for the love of God, if somehow Taysom Hill is available in your league, go through. Please pick up Taysom Hill. Going to be going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this next week. I actually think you should probably like that Buccaneers matchup because the Buccaneers should be heavy favorites here, and that's going to cause the New Orleans Saints to be forced to throw the ball. And now let's go to a player that we put on our waiver wire video last week. We got a lot of people pushing back with us, and I am here to say, ha ha, ha ha ha, I told you so. Here, let's go over to our guy, Rashaad Penny, a player that we were too high on when he busted in fantasy football in 2018. A player that we were too high on, and this is, of course, from Dynasty Fantasy Football. Y'all know that's pretty much exclusively what we covered for a very long time. Deep down in my heart, that's the number one thing I care about, Dynasty Fantasy Football. But nonetheless, if y'all remember the glory days and that's all we covered, Rashaad Penny was my guy, someone that we were just higher on than consensus. Every year, he would bust, and bust a little bit more. This past week, trust me, it brought me so much joy to see this final stat line against the Houston Texans. Now, I'm giving you that background to let you know that I am extremely biased with Rashaad Penny. Now, that being said, I'm going to try my best to be a little objective here, and I can acknowledge a couple things. A, Travis Homer did not play in this game, and B, they went up against the Houston Texans, which obviously is about the nicest matchup you can ask for. But still, Rashaad Penny comes out. And what's impactful with this game, because I'm not going to lie, as we said on the recap video, I did not watch a second of the Houston Texans and the Seattle Seahawks. And whenever we initially saw the stat line from Rashaad Penny, my initial reaction was, oh, well, I guess this makes sense if you only had him and Alex Collins, because remember, the reports on Friday and Saturday were making it sound like both DJ Dallas and Travis Homer were going to be inactive on Sunday. You dive into the snaps played, DJ Dallas was actually active here. DJ Dallas went out there and, he had 11 snaps. Alex Collins had 14. Rashaad Penny had 35. And based on the success that Penny had here, I would imagine that they continue to lean on Rashaad Penny going forward as the lead running back. Now, he does have some tough matchups coming up. He's going up against the Los Angeles Rams, going up against the Chicago Bears. Obviously, you're not excited about either matchup, but still, please, for the love of God, pick up Penny. This man is a 3-down workhorse running back, athletic, can catch the ball out of the backfield. I know he only had 1 reception this past week. They didn't really have to throw the ball in Seattle. Please go through, pick up Penny. And now our next running back is going to be D'Ernest Johnson. Here we are yet again with another injury in this Cleveland Browns backfield. You have Kareem Hunt going down, which sucks because y'all know, I have no Nick Chubb on any of our teams based on the fact that he was one of the worst picks in the first round this year. And we have Kareem Hunt everywhere. So now we're getting to the fantasy football playoffs. No Kareem Hunt, making Nick Chubb possibly look like a league-winning running back. But remember, D'Ernest Johnson was a running back that whenever you had no Nick Chubb and whenever you had no Kareem Hunt earlier this season, D'Ernest Johnson came out and, he was a fantastic option in Cleveland. He came out and he operated as a 3-down workhorse running back. He's going to have a role as well alongside Nick Chubb over the next few weeks. That role itself isn't going to be large enough to go through and start D'Ernest Johnson, but with Kareem Hunt finally working his way back from the calf injury, now an ankle injury, this probably is going to be something that is serious, and Kareem Hunt, I'd imagine, is going to miss multiple weeks here. Now, I'm recording this on Sunday night, so we don't have the official details of this injury. Of course, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and be live streaming every single night so I can go through and I can continue to give you all those updates as the week goes on with Kareem Hunt. But nonetheless, with D'Ernest Johnson, now he's going into a very similar mold to someone like Alexander Madison, to someone like Tony Pollard, where, with both of those running backs, you can't start either of them when you either have a healthy Ezekiel Elliott or you have a healthy Dalvin Cook. That's something that we talked about at length. But the second that one of those players misses, then all of a sudden you're looking at a top 5 running back in fantasy. Maybe top 5 is aggressive in the case of Alexander Madison. It's not. But here you can at least say top 10. And the reason for that is now D'Ernest Johnson is one running back injury away from being a primary feature down running back. It's going to be a bell cow in that offense behind the best offensive line in football. So I think now that you have Kareem Hunt down, D'Ernest Johnson very similar to someone like Alexander Madison, and you definitely need to have Alexander Madison on every roster as well. Now let's go over to a running back that's not nearly as exciting, but we've talked about some guys that are rostered in. I guess Penny's only rostered in 20%. D'Ernest Johnson's only rostered in 13%. We're going deep, I guess, and then we're going to go a little bit deeper with Royce Freeman at 0%. Now with Royce Freeman, this is an emergency, okay? If you were playing in a 10-team, if you were playing in an 8-team format, ignore this. It's not going to have anything to do with you. However, if you're playing in a deeper league, if you're playing in a dynasty format where you have to start 12 players, Royce Freeman can be very appealing here. Now, this week, he comes through, and yeah, he only gets 15 rushing yards off of 11 attempts, which isn't great to say the least, but he shows that he can get involved in the receiving game. He gets 8 targets out of the backfield, 6 receptions, 51 receiving yards at the same time. But what's more exciting than that is the situation that he may find himself in week 15. Because David Johnson was just put on the COVID list. And no, David Johnson was not put on the COVID list on Thursday. I know a lot of people want us to go through. They probably want us to talk about Philip Lindsay here in Miami because, yeah, you have Salvador Ahmad and Myles Gaskin both on the COVID list. But Gaskin was put on that COVID list, at this point, about 5 days ago. So I'm imagining that Gaskin should be good to go this following week, whereas that's not going to be the case. At least it's not going to be certain with a player like David Johnson, because with David Johnson, he was put on that list Sunday morning. So it's going to be a last minute thing on if David Johnson will be cleared and if David Johnson is going to play. That's something that you're going to have to continue to monitor. Now, here in the case of Royce Freeman, what's also really nice is obviously the injury to Rex Burkhead, but at the same time, the matchup you have against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And if you don't know who Royce Freeman is, it's kind of funny. We're talking about, Rashaad Penny and Royce Freeman in the same video. He actually was a running back that came out in that 2018 NFL draft class out of Oregon. He goes to the Denver Broncos in the 3rd round. And coming out of Oregon, so many people, especially in the dynasty fantasy football community, loved Royce Freeman. And this was a running back that profiled to be a 3-down workhorse. We knew he could catch the ball. He wasn't hyper athletic. That's one thing that he did not meet the minimum threshold with. And obviously, the story plays out where Phillip Lindsay's the starting running back in Denver. Freeman flashes, can never really get anything going. Was over there in Carolina earlier this season. But nonetheless, he did have the profile coming into the NFL as a potential 3-down running back. So I think that's possibly what you see this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars and a really nice matchup. Now let's go over to our next player, and this is going to be at the wide receiver position. Let's go over to Devante Parker. Now, Devante Parker currently rostered in 45% of leagues, and not much to discuss here. Obviously, he was on the bye week this past week, but with Devante Parker, this is a wide receiver that I think will be in the top 36 in our rankings. And keep in mind, with Devante Parker, he plays on the same offense as Jalen Waddle. And why that is significant is because you probably saw us about a month ago, and then you probably saw everybody else since then come out and talk about how great that fantasy football playoff schedule is for a wide receiver in Jalen Waddle. Now, great news is that's the same exact schedule you're going to have for Devante Parker. Parker should be playing in a great fantasy football environment over the next 3 weeks or so. And you don't have any clarity on Will Fuller. And if you're looking at the target volume you've had from Devante Parker so far this season, this is a wide receiver that has played 6 weeks and he's given you 48 targets. So, he's getting to 8 targets on a week-to-week basis. And 8 targets is enough to go through and slide in your starting lineup when you know that Devante Parker is a talented wide receiver. We saw that back in 2019. He also was very talented coming out of Louisville as well, but we don't need to dive into that. But nonetheless, with Devante Parker, if he's going to get 8 targets a game in great matchups, I think he will be a wide receiver you can consider for the flex spot, especially just with a lot of COVID uncertainties. Obviously players just like David Johnson that we discussed popping up on the list Sunday morning. Now, our next wide receiver is someone I owe a lot of apologies for. Let's talk about Robbie Anderson here. Now, yes, Robbie Anderson comes out. He has a great week. He was a top 5 wide receiver. And if you would have asked me pretty much any time this season outside of week 1, if you should have started Robbie Anderson, I would have laughed in your face saying, drop Robbie Anderson. There's no reason he should be on your roster based on the fact that he has been one of the least efficient wide receivers in the entire NFL. Now, he comes out this week. He draws 12 targets, 7 receptions, and 84 receiving yards, and the touchdown, of course. As we've said, he's a top 5 wide receiver. Obviously, back in 2020, Robbie Anderson was hyper-productive at the beginning of the season for a short duration. Maybe that's just enough to make him a player that is rosterable. I don't want to get excited about it at all because, of course, how bad he has been so far this year. I think he should be on a roster, though. Realistically, if he comes out, he gets another day with 10 targets in week 15, then possibly in a good matchup against the Buccaneers defense where we know they'll have to go through and look to pass the ball, and the Buccaneers defense have a better run defense than a pass. Maybe you end up playing him in week 16. And our next wide receiver I'm going to be a lot more excited about than what you actually have with Robbie Anderson is going to be Rashad Bateman. With Bateman here, currently rostered in about 36% of leagues. And the reason that I'm going to be excited about Rashad Bateman is, A, we know he has the talent profile. B, it looks like this is going to be a super serious injury for Lamar Jackson. And C, Sammy Watkins now is looking like he himself is going to be out of this offense for the Baltimore Ravens. So this past week, Rashad Bateman comes out. He gets 8 targets, which remember, that was what he was seeing earlier this season. Whenever he came out right after the bye week, he was getting 8 targets a game. And we were saying, this is great with Rashad Bateman, but be a little bit worried about Sammy Watkins coming back in. He should be able to take targets away from Bateman. that happened, and it honestly happened to a much greater extent than I was thinking, and that Bateman saw his role just completely scale back in this offense, where he was running less routes than both Devin Duvernay and Sammy Watkins. I mean, you see that with him only drawing 4 targets back in week 12, 1 target back in week 13. Well, now 8 targets, 7 receptions, 103 receiving yards. I think that this is also a player that we can all agree is very talented. At least he was a great prospect coming out of Minnesota in that 2021 draft class. Only a rookie. Looks like you won't have Sammy Watkins here. Of course, we'll go through and continue to give those Sammy Watkins injury updates later this week in those live streams. Just make sure you subscribe to the channel. But, I mean, this looks like it could be a classic rookie season breakout from Rashad Bateman. Now, our next wide receiver, boring because he played on Thursday, KJ Osborn. With Osborn, I mean, obviously he made our waiver wire video last week with the injury to Adam Thielen. I think you go through, you look to play him this week, and I will be the first person to admit that I was hesitant to tell people to go put him in the starting lineup against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I told a lot of people to bench KJ Osborn. He was a high-end wide receiver 2 this week, so of course, if you could go back, you'd love to get him in there at the flex. He had 9 targets, 3 receptions, which of course isn't great, but he comes away with the long ball, 83 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown as well. So if you were to want to just go through and put KJ Osborn in the flex spot this week, I'd be fine with it. I think KJ Osborn is a wide receiver that you can definitely rank in the top 30. Now, our last wide receiver, we told a million people to play this past week. This is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. The reason that you were confident in playing St. Brown right away this week was not only the fact that this is a Detroit Lions wide receiver depth chart that has absolutely nobody, but at the same time, I mean, when you remove TJ Hawkinson, when you remove DeAndre Swift from this offense, I mean, all of a sudden, Amon-Ra St. Brown has to have a super large role. I mean, he had 12 targets back in week 13 against the Minnesota Vikings. He draws 12 targets yet again this week. And of course, those targets for St. Brown are going to be significantly less efficient than what you have with a wide receiver, say like Mike Williams. So of course, that's going to be the case. With St. Brown, I don't want to make the argument that he's a super talented player. That's not where I'm coming from. And at the same time, he is a very unathletic slot wide receiver. Throw on to the fact that he plays for the Detroit Lions. So yeah, he's not going to be efficient, but it doesn't matter if he's not going to be efficient. You don't have to be efficient when you're going to be consistently getting 12 targets almost every week. Now, this next week's going to be a really tough matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. I would not start him against the Cardinals in week 15, but in week 16, he'll be going up against the Atlanta Falcons, who, I mean, somehow Robbie Anderson just managed to be a top 5 wide receiver in that matchup. I guess we need to go through and talk a little bit about the Los Angeles Chargers with no Austin Eckler. And here, we don't even know if Austin Eckler is going to be missing. Now, what's a little concerning, however, is that he is going to be playing on Thursday. So because he plays on Thursday, only going to have 4 days to rest. Now, he left in the third quarter, didn't come back in the fourth, but you really need to look at the fact that this game was out of hand. I mean, I think that this does sound like a minor injury for Austin Eckler, where we will get more information about this later on this week. But if you were to have Austin Eckler miss this game, one issue is I don't necessarily think that we could just run to pick up Justin Jackson, run to pick up Joshua Kelly right away, because it looks like this backfield will be split damn near 50-50 in the case of an absence of Austin Eckler. I mean, Justin Jackson got 20 snaps this past week, where Joshua Kelly had 19. I mean, it looks like you would have Justin Jackson as the running back that profiles to be a little bit more as the scat back, a little bit more as the running back that's going to get targets out of the backfield, where Joshua Kelly more as the first and second down grinder. I would probably put my money on Joshua Kelly. The reason being is with Kelly, he does have the profile where he could maybe, just maybe, turn into a running back getting 20 plus touches on a week-to-week basis. That's never going to be the case of Justin Jackson. I don't want to get too excited about either player. You definitely prefer pretty much, I mean, I want to say every other running back on this. I may prefer Royce Freeman over these players, because with Royce Freeman, there's a real possibility that he is the only running back in Houston, whereas this is more so going to be a 50-50 backfield split. I'd love to know your opinion, though. I just really think that if it's going to be a pure running back by committee, probably not a reason to go out there and sprint to pick them up. Now, of course, thank you so much for everybody coming out and supporting this video. Now, I was thinking about adding defenses in to be key streaming options for the fantasy football playoffs, but I felt like we should go through and we should maybe make an entire video just about those defenses. So you'll see that later this week, talking about how to dominate the fantasy football playoffs with team defenses. But yeah, that's all I got for you. Really hope you have a great day, and I really hope that we get to see you out in the live stream sometime tonight.